Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta Ndlela. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be tuning into. Communication and soft skills are crucial for your career growth and leadership development. We are looking for entrepreneurs and professionals who would like to discuss their communication challenges on the show. And if this is of interest to you, please go to the show notes and book a time slot with me. Now let's get communicating with Deidre Tshein, all the way from New York, but she's an Australian by origin. She's joining us today as someone who would help us with so much when it comes to podcasting and repurposing your content. She's the CEO and founder of Capsho, and she's here to talk about how you can literally make your life easier as an entrepreneur, as a content creator, and so much more. And before I go any further, please help me welcome her to the show. Hi, Deirdre.
Hello, Roberta. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm excited that you're here. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I think we just before you were like, you know what? Let me record this. We were actually having a conversation, and I
Mm.
was like, "Do you want the short version or the super long version?"
We love long versions. Well, me personally, especially.
Okay, cool. Well,
So
why don't
please feel free. Yes.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so by way of background, as you mentioned, I'm Aussie, grew up in Australia, but I'm Asian by ethnicity, and we my parents actually moved to Australia as first migrants, kind of during the big immigration influx that Australia had, and with that comes it feels like it comes a lot of like expectations, I would say. They moved to Australia because they wanted to give my brother and I, better life, better opportunities, a better education, all of that. And so I was always kind of raised to be like, you got to work hard, and it's got to be all about the effort that you put in. And, I was meant to become a doctor and all of that.
Or engineer or black sheep of the family.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm gonna say, like, I feel like I became a black sheep, even though I instead of going into medicine, I actually studied law, which people are like, really? That makes you the black sheep of the family.
You know how I
Um,
know? I was in South Korea for about a decade teaching English, so I know Korean parent expectations.
yeah, exactly. That's just what happens.
Mm,
So yeah, so but I say all that because it did, I kind of like had this path that I was gonna follow. It was I did study law, and even though I didn't enjoy it, so I was like, okay,
mhm.
I'm not going to go into that. But I knew that I was going to go into corporate in some way. I ended up getting into studying my career in an investment bank in Australia. It's called Macquarie Bank, which is the biggest investment bank in Australia,
Yeah.
and so that was so, I had this view in my mind that I was going to climb the corporate ladder and, do all of that. And I had like my quarter life crisis and realized that, like climbing the ladder was actually not something I wanted to do because, I was actually really fortunate. I was put on this project where I had pretty big visibility to all the way up to the CEO.
Mm.
And when I was in those rooms, I saw kind of who you had to become to make it, and I didn't really want to lose myself in that. And so I was
How
kind of
old were you? Sorry to interrupt you, Deidre.
yeah, I was like
How
early
old were you
20s.
when you? That is amazing because a lot of us come to that realization much later in life. After
Yeah.
you want the climb, you climb, you climb, you climb, and then in your 40s, you think, I'm not sure if I like my life. In your 20s, you came to that
Yeah,
realization.
yeah, it was
Wow.
pretty yeah, I don't know how that happened, but I saw people who were in their 40s, like, as I said, they were pretty senior people
Mm.
in that room, and I think it's because, like, I got firsthand visibility to, like, all the politicking that happens, all the back channeling, all the things that I was just like, even at that age, I don't want to become this person who
Mhm.
has to do all this. That's kind of what happened. And so that kind of left me, I didn't quit at that. Like I was still like, plodding along, but in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, we'll have to figure this out. Like, what does that mean? Um, and at the same time, my then boyfriend, now husband, he, funny enough, he was studying medicine. He's not Asian,
Oh.
but he was like, he was studying medicine, and
So he was
he,
very welcome into the family
yeah,
based on,
I half
okay, his path
think
is
he,
acceptable.
yeah, I think he did it mostly because he wanted to, be welcomed into the family.
I
So,
love it.
but, like, unfortunately, what that meant was that he was hating it, like, he wasn't enjoying it. He didn't
Mm,
like being in hospital, all of that, and so we were at this stage of our lives where we were like, "Oh my gosh, what does this mean? Like, what's next
mm.
for us?" We had also just moved out together, and he started, cooking more, and he started baking, and he just loved the process, and he would always be working to perfect. I had this favorite dessert. It's essentially a chocolate fondant, like a chocolate lava cake,
Oh
and
my
he
God.
would like, he would be working on this dessert to perfect it for us, and, just through that process, we were like, "Why don't we give, opening up a dessert bar a shot?" It wasn't really a big thing back in Sydney. And I love my desserts, and I knew that there were more and more people who wanted somewhere to go that wasn't a bar, that,
Mm.
like, after a movie and things like that. So we kind of decided to give it a shot, and we opened up, it was called the Choc Pot. We opened up a dessert bar, and we actually grew that to 5 locations, in total in
Wow.
Sydney, and we also, during that journey, also opened a burger restaurant, and we had 2, of those locations. So, that happened, and then in the end of 2018, we found out that one of our store managers, and he was actually the store manager of our, like, busiest store. We found out that, for years he had been stealing from the store,
What?
and it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, it was in the
Oh
6 figures. Yeah.
no.
So it was a
Quick
lot of money.
question. You don't, so that means you never audited over the years? What was going on?
Well, it was just never something that came to mind. Like, we never went into it thinking that an employee would steal from us, to be honest.
Just not even thinking or suspecting anything, but just the idea of, when you do taxes at the end of the year, you declare that, okay, this store made this much revenue, or
Yeah,
how
so there
does
was
it
a way
work?
that he was gaming our point of sale system so that it was just not even tracked.
Oh my
Um,
word.
yeah, it wasn't until we realized that it was happening that we figured out how he was gaming it, and we were able to figure out how much he was
Mm,
taking from the store, but, like, it wasn't a place that we, without going into the details of how point of sale systems and
right.
stuff work, but it wasn't even an area that we would have gone into, or be unless this happened. Like, yeah, so
Mm,
it didn't come up in any audits, or because it wasn't even something that was reportable, if that makes
right.
sense. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so, that all happened, and from that experience, like, I was definitely like, "Well, it was it was great, and, we had a lot of fun," but to be honest, hospitality wasn't really something that I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life. Seems
Hmm.
to be a theme of, my life, of just doing things and realizing that it's not the thing that I
This
want to be
is
doing.
not me.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
And at the same time, I was exploring this fashion technology business with another co-founder, a really good friend of mine who I had actually met in corporate at Macquarie Bank.
mm,
Her name's Bona, and we were exploring this, yeah, this different, it was kind of a way to bring AI and styling and shops and things together. Again, it was a pretty new concept in Australia. Kind of it, and it was around about the time when Stitch Fix was, and those kind of, services were really becoming known. And so that was kind of the idea that we are exploring. Now, the problem with Australia is that it's a great place to incubate something, but there's no big market there. So we knew at
mm,
some stage that we would have to move either to, like, North America or to Asia to really, explore any of these ideas that we had. And so when that happened at the end of 2018, in terms of, like, finding, it was kind of like this coming together of all these different paths, like, that happened. And I was in this frame of mind of, like, well, hospitality isn't the thing that I want to be doing. we were exploring this fashion technology idea and getting to the point with our mentors to be like, okay, we're going to have to make a decision as to the next step as to where we want to take this thing. And so it was all happening. And I was like, well, you know what? Like, what better place to explore, the coming together of fashion technology than New York City? And so
Of
that's when we made the
course, the
move.
capital.
Right. And so I was like, whatever, let's just do it. Like, what do we have to lose? So we kind of like spent a good 6 months systemizing absolutely everything in the stores, because we actually still had them. We were still managing them remotely when we made the move to New York.
Yeah.
And we made the move in mid 2019, which, is perfect timing because it was just before COVID. But like
It was coming.
it
Yeah.
was coming, yeah. And it was actually a really, really great time because we spent, the rest of 2019 really hitting the ground. Like, we were at our hypothesis was that users would either be college students or young professionals, on Wall Street. So we literally went to like NYU campus, Columbia campus. We went to, like, we knew some young professionals anyway, and they just like started introducing us to their colleagues, into their friends. And we just like really went deep into testing this idea out. And what we found was that while there was a problem, it just wasn't a big enough problem that people were willing to break the habits for right now. So we essentially failed the idea at the end of 2019.
Okay, let's just recap. When you founded the fashion technology AI, you what did you think initially was the problem, and now you say you realize that it wasn't big enough?
Yeah. So obviously we thought like we always, the problems that we generally end up solving for are problems that we have ourselves. So for me,
Mhm.
I was like, I don't really enjoy shopping, which I know sounds strange as like a female, but
Especially
I find it,
consumer.
I find it really overwhelming. Like, I just don't really enjoy the process of shopping.
Mm,
And so I was kind of trying to figure out like, how can I solve this issue of like knowing my particular style and the things that I was shopping for, whether, in my past life that might have been a corporate thing or whether it was for events or whatever it was. How do I make this a really, really easy process for me, and then therefore for other women? And so
mm,
that was kind of the problem, that was like based on someone's style, personality, based on what it is that they are actually looking to dress for. How can we help that shopping process, but also, and then how do we help with the styling process as well? So that was kind of like the problem that we were looking to solve for.
mhm.
And you know I think, even you're a bit where you're like, I love shopping, I love doing my own styling, I love like, right, like, it's, for some people it's a problem, but even for them it's not really a huge problem because they have ways to get around it. Like, they might have friends who they just lean on to help do that for them or with them. They have other even on a day-to-day basis, they have shortcuts that they take to be like, okay, I kind of know what's in my wardrobe, and this is just,
To put
like,
the outfit together.
yeah, they just, they have
Mm,
other ways. And it's really hard to break someone's habit unless it's like a really, really like painful, acute issue that they're dealing with. And so that was what we were up against. And rather than continuing to sink more time and money into it, because, we didn't really have a huge runway. I mean, we were completely bootstrapped. We just decided to like call it quits and,
the
go on
reason
to the
I
next thing.
ask is a lot of the time you work with coaches, consultants, and they say, I don't know my potential clients' pain points, or is this really a problem for them? Or I know what the problem is, but I'm just not messaging it the way
Hmm.
they say it to themselves.
Yes.
So in the online business space, especially, that's always been a huge pain point. Again,
Yeah.
for that's why I asked you to verify, because a lot of the time you think, oh, if I have this problem, does that mean everybody else has it?
Yeah, yeah. It
Or
it is a
mm,
it's a trap that, and I, to be honest, I fell into that trap time and time again, even as someone who has, done the entrepreneurship thing, many times over. Um, but it's not surprising. Like, yeah, it's a trap that we all fall into. If I'm going to be
mhm,
honest. And yeah, there's actually another, like, even with the initial, and I can come to that as well, because I'm going to come back around actually, if that's okay, to
please
this
do.
theme, because
Yeah.
I fell as I said, I fell into that trap again. But so fast forward anyway, we failed that. the good thing is that at the same time that we were talking to potential end customers, we were also talking to some brands and boutiques that was going to be on like the other side of our platform. And every time we spoke to them and we really delved into what problem they were facing or that they had, it was all about acquisition. Time and again, it was like, we just need more people we need to acquire. And so we actually went back to them when we decided to fail the technology idea. We went
Mm-hmm.
back to them and were just like, hey, why don't we help you with acquisition? And so we ended up falling into somewhat like an agency business, helping these brands and boutiques with their digital marketing. And then that's when COVID hit. COVID hit,
Mm.
and it kind of, for everyone, put a bit of a spanner in the works. And for us, it actually made us think about how we make the transition into becoming more of an online business. And that is when we went into coaching ourselves. So we went into coaching e-commerce, other e-commerce brands with their digital marketing. So essentially transitioning our agency business into a coaching one. And that was when we started our first podcast. And it
Mm.
was kind of through that process. It was through a few things. It was through that process of, figuring out how it was that we had to market a podcast, because unfortunately creating content is not content marketing, because we have to actually market our content. And I figured that out. And, that was happening. And on the other hand as well, because I was coaching e-commerce business owners, a lot of times, they go into e-commerce because they have they love the product, obviously, that they're creating, but
Mm-hmm.
also B, a lot of times they don't actually want to be the face of their business. They want to hide behind their product. And the more that I got talking to them, I was like, well, you kind of can't, because especially when you're just starting, the only differentiator that you have in the market versus an Amazon or like anyone else out there is you. Like, you are literally the only thing that differentiates you from any other brand out there. And so I was like, you have to bring your stories to life. And so when they were like, okay, I get it, but how? I just don't know how. That was actually how the first iteration of Capsho came about.
Oh.
And the first iteration of Capsho was very, very rudimentary. Like, it did not have any AI or anything. It was very rules based. But what it did was it would take people through how to tell their story. So it would actually prompt them. We actually had an early user describe it as a combination of like Mad Libs and like journaling. It was kind of like we would prompt them through how, them telling their stories, and then our software, just through some rules, would actually convert that into a bank of social media captions and emails. And
Mm.
so that was the first iteration of Capsho. And when we were working on it, and we were like doing some beta testing and, getting some people on it and stuff, I got carried away, as a lot of us entrepreneurs do. And I fell into the trap again. The trap that I fell into was like, well, this is amazing. It's going to literally help every entrepreneur. I can't wait for all entrepreneurs to get their hands on this. So this was like late 2021 that,
Mm-hmm.
this was happening. And so then we started to market it, and I was like, why is this not getting any traction? Because in my mind, I was like, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to, you maybe struggle with telling your stories on social media, Capsho is for you. But it was really struggling to get cut through. Back to what you were saying about people being like, well, it's just my messaging. It's just something. That was literally what was going through. I was like, it's our messaging. It must be our messaging. There's something off here. And so I spoke to our coach, and I was like, yeah, this is just going to be a really quick 5-minute thing. Can you just help us with our messaging here? And,
I love that.
45 minutes later, he's like totally like breaking us down, because he's like, it is not a messaging problem. It's actually an audience problem. Because we were doing that thing again, as entrepreneurs, where we're like, we get really excited about the thing that, and we believe so much in what we're doing, that
Mm.
it's like, we want to be able to help everyone with this. And then he's like, everyone is not an audience. And I was like, okay, well, entrepreneurs. And he's like, entrepreneurs is not an audience. I was like,
They
okay,
don't
well,
feel each and every one of everyone
yeah,
feels like you're not talking to them specifically.
exactly. And so his challenge to us was like, really think about who who makes the most sense for you to be serving, in terms of like, because because you might have listened to that story and you might have been like, well, you were coaching e-commerce people. Like, wouldn't it just make sense to keep focusing on e-commerce people? The problem was that like there was a little bit of a barrier because we had to convince them first that they had to tell their stories. And then it was
Mhm.
like, hey, use Capsho. So when we were talking to our coach, he was like, well, you definitely don't want to be doing any convincing because that's a lot of time and effort and, a lot of lag. So who already knows the power of storytelling that you can just like immediately slot in yourself into,
Mhm.
into their process. And the more that we thought about it, I was like, well, actually, like entrepreneurs who podcast, because I'm an entrepreneur who podcast, and actually the podcast itself is such a rich basis of like content that that's really, instead of even having to prompt people through telling a story, it's like there are already stories there.
Yes.
And so the more that I thought about that, the more that it just made complete sense. And that was really where the next iteration, like the iteration of Capsho that is actually what we kind of see now, came about, which is helping entrepreneurs who create audio or video long form content. So whether that's a
Mhm.
podcast, whether that's a YouTube video or live, helping them use that content. So they just upload that into Capsho, and our AI actually does then repurpose it into a whole host of written content marketing. So that's social media captions across all the different platforms. It's emails, it's blog posts, it's LinkedIn articles. It identifies sound bites, it identifies quotes. It is like literally almost all the pieces of content you need, apart from like the video part of it, at your fingertips. And that's essentially what we ended up creating, and that's where we are now.
Just one quick question. When you say except for the video, you mean the shorts, the
Yeah,
30-second
yeah, yeah.
shorts?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
it
while
doesn't
we
create
so we
those.
identify the sound bites, so we can identify here's the timestamp and the actual
Hmm.
like 30-second clip, but we actually don't clip yet.
Create the
Yeah,
clip yet.
yeah,
Uh-huh. So that's how Capshaw was founded.
yeah.
And
So that's
who
the
are
super long story.
Capshawians?
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Capshovians. Yeah, Capshovians are basically like our users. And how I really identify, or how I describe Capshovians, is that they are intelligently lazy. And hence why our mascot is the sloth, is
Look at
because we're
that.
all about how we best be intelligently lazy.
What does intelligently lazy mean exactly?
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, so I laziness is like such a it's so counterintuitive to everything that I grew up believing, which is so bizarre. But what I found was that the more that I prioritized laziness, and I put that in inverted commas because I know
Mhm.
laziness can seem like this, you're literally doing nothing, but sometimes that is what you do. Like literally, you're doing nothing. For me, like when I get into these modes of like actually doing nothing, it's crazy because my business actually grows. It's
That's when
crazy.
the
So,
ideas pop up as well, because you're
well, that's the
not,
thing because
yeah.
yeah, ideas pop up. You actually focus. You force yourself to focus on the right things, on the things that need to be focused on, because
Hmm.
otherwise, when I wasn't like, I used to work literally 7 days a week. I would be working, and because I had this like this need to feel productive, like I was like, I need to be productive because otherwise my business isn't going to grow and we're not going to be making any money, and all these narratives would be going through my head. And when I kind of like got burnt out, as we, that's always how the story goes,
Yes.
and I forced myself to take time, like literally, and I would be like, I would think back to some of the best moments when I was a child, and it was literally when I could wake up on the weekend and do nothing. It was like it's like such a forgotten memory to me now because I've forgotten what it feels like to to do that, to think like that. Where I would just
Hmm.
spend literally all day, I'm still in my pajamas, I'm in bed. I literally have not gone out of bed except to maybe go to the bathroom and eat something. And I would just be in bed reading because I love reading. And that's all I would do. And when I kind of like now, kind of force myself to do that, it meant that I had to be way better with my time. And I was like, okay, well, I can't do all the things that I used to do, as in, i.e., hustle, which
Mm-hmm.
means that I'm like, okay, I need to prioritize. I need to prioritize my time on really the most important things. So it forced me to focus. And it actually did open my mind, to your point, it opened my mind up to other things, like other possibilities. It meant that when I went for a walk, I was actually engaging with the world around me, just observing things. And just with those observations came like totally left field ideas that I could work into back into the business. It was crazy. And so the more that I, did prioritize laziness in a way, like the more that my business grew. But at the same time, we want to be like intelligently lazy, because it's easy to be lazy without the systems and the support, and everything else that you need to build into your business to actually reap the benefits of the laziness.
Mm. And
And
have the
so
outcomes you're looking for. Yeah.
exactly. And so that's
Mm.
where the intelligently lazy brand comes from.
First time we heard the term, and I like it, especially because when you talk about productivity, a lot of us fall into that trap of, oh, if my calendar looks full and I have to-do lists for the next 24 hours, I'm going to feel productive.
Yes. It's just, what's funny? It is another form of procrastination.
What?
Yeah. That's what I figured out. I figured out that being productive in that way, definitely for me, and I think for a lot of us, high achievers especially, is just another form of procrastination, of not actually getting through to the thing that you need to do and is
Hmm.
actually going to get results. But it's hard because generally those things are the hardest things for us
So
to
this
actually
just
do.
feeds your ego, but it's not moving the needle in the direction of
Exactly.
where you want it to go.
Yeah.
Wow. Now back to the messaging. You wrote a book. It's Honey Marketing
Honey trap
Traps?
marketing.
Honey
Yeah. Honey
Trap
trap marketing.
Marketing.
Yes.
Yes, please tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, it basically distills. So I am an absolute marketing nerd. Um, you can probably tell. I mean, we're building a whole software around content marketing.
Right.
And yeah, basically, honey trap marketing goes into my, I call it the traffic pyramid. It's my framework distilling my experiences, but also the experiences of a lot of entrepreneurs around me, and how it is that we market online. The traffic pyramid, there's 4 tiers to it. Really quickly, it's like it starts with passive organic marketing, goes into active organic market. Passive organic marketing really is just like the process of content creation.
Hmm.
And in creating content, it still has to be good content because only good content is going to get cut through. But a lot of times we create this content, we put it out there, we publish it, and then we sit back and we think that it's going to then, in quotations, do its thing. And then we get really surprised because it's like, well, nothing's happening, right? This goes back to the story when I first started my podcast and I was like, oh my gosh, what? I have to actually market my content. I have to actually, that's when we go into the
You
second
know
tier.
why? And this has been my experience too, which is we think because it's so good, and I know people need this. Why
Yes.
are the people who are dancing half naked having 5 million views and I have 10 views? I should have, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we fall into that trap of, but it's
Yes.
good stuff.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh. All the time. All the time. And that's
Right.
that's kind of why I'm like really intentional then about the second tier of the track pyramid, because that's active organic marketing, which is like,
Mhm.
hey, we've created this content. We've been putting a lot of work into it. Like, let's actually have this content working for us. Let's actually have it, you know, be found would be a good thing. Like actually reach the audience we want it to. And that's where the active organic marketing comes into it. So that's, and really depends on what the platforms that, people want to be on. For me, I'm very intentional right now. I'm on 2 social media platforms. So that's Facebook and LinkedIn. They each have
Mhm.
their own different strategies as to how to actually make it work for us. I am imminently in the next few, I say imminently, but it's really going to be in the next 2 to 3 months. I'm going to be focusing on YouTube, as another platform, but there's a full strategy behind that. So I want to be really intentional, and leveraging SEO. So doing blog posts. So those for me is how I activate my content, is like really leveraging, all of the tactics and tools around SEO, all the things that YouTube has to offer, and then also how I can actually work LinkedIn and Facebook, uh, do the things that they want us to do in a way so that
Mhm.
it actually gets in front of people. So that's the second tier of the traffic pyramid is to
Right.
the active organic
Active
marketing.
organic marketing. Mm.
The third tier is leveraging other people's audiences. So, podcasts, getting guesting on other people's podcasts, holding virtual summits. There's a whole host of ways that you can actually leverage other people's audiences. And I loved doing that. And then the fourth tier, the tip of the pyramid is paid ads. That's really when you really, and I would say, quite honestly, you could just hang out in the bottom three tiers and
Mm.
just focus on organic marketing without having to go into paid ads. That's my challenge for Capsho. Definitely over the next 12 to 18 months is we are just going to grow organically. That's all we're going to focus on, and
Mhm.
then look to scale with paid ads.
Right. Now let's go back to the social media and the marketing when it comes to that. One of the challenges we have, okay, actually two elephants in the room I picked up. SEO.
Mm,
Ooh, what? And then the second one, which you'll come back to later, is when you say, LinkedIn and Facebook, this big word called algorithm. You know how
mm,
sometimes they will approach and say, the algorithm has changed. Let me help you with your SEO. There's only SEO algorithm. So, what do I do as a podcaster for my show notes,
mm.
for my social media promos to meet those or to literally play into the SEO and algorithm changes space?
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll try to break this down really, like SEO is one of those things that sounds it's feels so overwhelming because it's like sounds so technical. But I try to break it down really simply. And the
Mhm.
core of how to have SEO work for you is just like it's just to have empathy for your audience. I'm going to put it like that. Okay. And what does that mean? What does having empathy for your audience means? It means, so you mentioned show notes, and I'm assuming
Mhm.
you mean show notes on like a website, like, it's almost blog post style. Is that what
Right.
you mean?
Let's say you've released an episode
Hmm.
and you want to post it you on LinkedIn or Facebook. So you want to post it on LinkedIn and Facebook audience so that they know that they need to go to Apple and Spotify and listen to it. This is your latest episode. So you
Okay.
write notes and say, I just had an amazing conversation with what's her
Yeah.
name? John Lee Dumas and go and listen.
Yeah. Okay. So
Mm.
that's the social media side. All right. So
Hmm.
I'll come back to that. Why don't we just really quickly talk about the SEO side of it? So my
Sure.
process around this is, yeah, I have a podcast episode. Capsho actually, when I upload my episode, creates a title and description. The
Hmm.
description is also commonly known as show notes as well. So it has things like, here's a summary, here's a bio, here's chapter summaries. It goes into a ton of things that is important for show notes. Now, show notes is the reason there's two ways that show notes are used. One is to put into your hosting platform. So whether that's like Buzzsprout or Podbean or Captivate, whatever hosting platform you use, that's where show notes can live. Show notes can also live on something that's like a blog post, like a website. So we use
Hmm.
Podpage for that. It creates a podcast website. And so creating a podcast website is actually really important because that's where you can actually put some SEO juice into it. What I mean by that is that's how you actually get your podcast found when someone's searching for the topic that you're creating content for. And so basically what I do on the SEO side is why I say have empathy for your audience is because a lot of times you might hear words like keyword stuffing,
Hmm.
and things like that, to as the SEO tactic. And I always say when you step back and you go, how do we get people to discover our podcast through the podcast website? Is all about having empathy because in the same way that you want something to be really readable by a human, that's actually what the search engines want as well. So when you think about Google, like they want your stuff to be readable. And not only that, but the more that you can keep someone on your page or even clicking through to other pages because you're still keeping them on their platform essentially,
Hmm.
the better. And so when you can put links that are linking to other resources that are valuable and still, but still make sense in the topic and theme that you've spoken about, the more that you can actually add images and, we call it rich media, but images and like video content and stuff on that page as well. Infographics, like distill and by the way, Capsho helps with all of this as well, right? Like it will actually, yeah, it
Wow.
does. It actually helps you pull out the content for to create your infographics for in Canva.
Mm.
But infographics, putting things like that is what is going to help you on the SEO side. So I always go back to, okay, how do I make this really easy and readable and enjoyable for someone to look and read this page? That's what I always focus on from the SEO perspective. So that's on the SEO side. Does that kind of
Mhm.
help there?
Yes, as you said, empathy for your listener or reader, meaning if they search your topic, then when they find the blog post, it's
Yeah,
like it's fun, it's enjoyable to read. Yes,
exactly.
that makes
Exactly.
sense. Yes.
Now on the social media side, I actually leverage. So I'm never going to proclaim to be the expert in all things because I'm just not. So I am very privileged to work with someone who I see as a social media expert. Her name's Katie Brinkley, and she actually has a strategy that's called the 4-post social media strategy. So it's only 4 posts, and once you get into it, it actually gets to be quite simple.
Mhm.
So you start with the awareness post. It goes into an elaboration post, a community post, and then your action post. So let's say in your example, when you were like, we just recorded a podcast and
Yeah.
we want people to listen to it. I actually just follow that strategy. And what that looks like is the awareness post is going to look different based on the platform. So I don't ever Facebook and LinkedIn are my 2 platforms. I actually don't post the same post on both
Oh.
because each platform favors different things. So, for example, on Facebook, what does well on Facebook for an awareness post is, those like 1 sentence statements on like a
Mhm.
colored background, like that actually does really well on Facebook. And so I'll
Mm.
do one of those, and it might be like an unpopular opinion or like something that's, just it's to get away. It's like to cast the net out, right? And so the
Right.
more that you can almost be a little bit controversial or something, then the more engagement it actually gets. That's to get the awareness, right? That works pretty well on Facebook. LinkedIn, what works well is a poll, right? So similar,
Mm.
I can use the same theme on both, but different types of content. And then the elaboration post is really then going a little bit deeper into that theme. So that's where I give value. That's where I actually share a tip or a piece of information that, if it was John Lee Dumas, like that he shared on the podcast. And
Mhm.
then the next post is community, which could be me talking about how I met John Lee Dumas. I'm actually really good friends with his wife Kate.
Nice.
It could be
Mm.
something about that. But the community is really about bringing a little bit more of you into as a person into the
And
narrative.
engaging with those who are participating in the post.
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And then it just naturally leads into the action post to be like, hey, I've been talking about this theme this whole week. If you actually just want to like listen to our conversation about it, here it is. And
So it's like
that's
a
kind of how it
build
works.
up.
Yeah, exactly. And you spoke
Mm.
about algorithm. The reason why this strategy works is because that build up is actually playing to the algorithm, because as you know, the more that people engage with your posts, the more that they actually see your posts. And the reason why a lot of those call to action posts don't work is because we don't do that build. We don't actually get that engagement and have the algorithms on those platforms working for us first. We just put it out there. We just be like, listen to this podcast episode, and no one engages with it, no one does anything with it, which means that more and more your favor, I guess, in terms of the algorithm just keeps dropping.
Mhm.
And so to the point where they just don't surface your content to anyone. And so
So
that's
when people
why.
scroll, your stuff doesn't pop up at the top
Yeah,
because it hasn't
exactly.
had engagement before.
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's just that's just to give you a bit of an insight into, I know you mentioned SEO and social media, like that's kind of what we do on those
Because
ends.
those
And
are the two
Capsho actually,
buzzwords. Mm, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
and Capsho helps with actually creating that content for you.
Again, intelligently lazy. It
Yeah.
literally does everything for you. And then one last thing, Deirdre, before I let you go. So,
Mm.
how do you find the entrepreneurs, the consultants, the coaches? who have podcasts that you help?
Well, it's so again, I go through the traffic pyramid. That's literally how it's traffic, right? So
Mm.
I create content that speaks specifically to them. So what are they? What are some of the things that they might be struggling with? What are some of the things that they want to up level in? Who are the types of people that they want to hear from? So, I always start with like, what's the content that's going to be valuable for that specific person? And then I go where they are. The reason why I focus on LinkedIn and Facebook is because someone asked me like, why aren't I on Instagram? Like when I grew my hospitality business, so like the chalk pot,
Mm.
Instagram was literally pretty much the only platform that we were on. And that's because food lovers
You
are
want
on
to see
Instagram.
pictures?
Exactly. They want, yeah, they want that food
Mm.
porn, right? They're on Instagram for that.
Yes.
My audience, like they are on Instagram because let's be honest, it's 2024, everyone is everywhere.
Hmm.
But what are they on Instagram to do? They're on Instagram to talk about their own thing. They're not on Instagram to consume my information to help them. Like they're on there to promote
Mm.
themselves, which is totally fine. Like that works for them. But they are on LinkedIn and Facebook to consume the type of information that I'm putting out. And so that's why I focus on those platforms. And so that's where I look to activate as well with SEO and getting discovered through SEO and through YouTube. And then I go into leverage, like the third tier, leveraging other people's audiences. I speak to and I partner with people who have an audience that would make total sense for them to also be my audience, right? Like
Yeah.
other entrepreneurs who create content. And so literally that's, to answer your question, it's literally just going through the traffic pyramid. I always come back to that. That's how I get in front of and reach my audience day in and day out.
Hmm. Any last tips? I saw some of your YouTube videos, and you really do share strategies on what to do
Mm.
about this on your podcast. Any last tips for us podcasters or entrepreneurs who have podcasts to say these are the things you can share on your YouTube video to add value? And the fact that, because usually I post, like I'm going to post this interview when this episode is published, right? But in
Mm.
between those tidbits for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 10 minutes.
Mm. Yeah. So in between, like it really depends on the strategy that you want to follow. For me, I actually don't do a lot of short videos yet. Now, as I said, we're about to embark on the YouTube, like really getting into it.
Hmm.
Um, and the reason why I say it is because like we again being intelligently lazy, I made a very conscious decision to be like, Facebook and LinkedIn, that's all we're focusing from a social media perspective, not even YouTube. Like we do sometimes publish videos. I think you've seen some of them,
Yes.
but I say we're not really doing it because we haven't been doing it with intention. And I'm all about intention. It's kind of like, yep, if I'm going to commit to a platform, like I want to make sure that we're doing it well, in the way that that it the platform wants us to be on there,
Hmm.
and so to be honest, like I actually don't do a lot of those short form videos yet because we had to just build muscle memory. We had to get really good on the platforms that we are on right now. And so to be honest, that you asked for advice, like that is my one piece of advice is you we all need to focus. It's really,
Hmm.
really hard. It's so hard to do. And I know this like firsthand, I know this. I have entrepreneurship ADHD like every other entrepreneur out there. But it was again coming back to being intelligently lazy, right? Like it wasn't until I forced myself to be lazy, which meant I had to force myself to focus on the things that was going to move the dial for me, which meant I had to be really, really intentional about like, okay, as a team, we do not have the bandwidth to be on more than two right now because
Hmm.
we're learning, right? Like we're looking, we need to learn how the platform wants us to be on there. We need to learn how to get that engagement up. We need to learn what types of call to actions work on there. We need to learn like there's a lot to learn when you're on a particular platform. And so we just needed to learn. And now, but we're at the point where we've built that muscle memory, which
Mm.
means that can kind of like happen because you built the muscle memory, right? Like it just can happen. And now we're ready to then put the next thing on. The next thing on for us is YouTube. And so that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to go that's going to be like 20% of the time is going to be all about continuing to build that muscle memory in the things that we already know, LinkedIn and Facebook.
Facebook
80%
and
of our
LinkedIn.
time is going to be, okay, we need to build new muscle memory, which takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. But that's the intention that we're going into this with. So focus is
Mm.
the name of the game. It's the only way you're going to be able to
Focus.
win.
Yes. Focused, and it sounds like monitoring and evaluating what works, what doesn't, what do we change, what do we improve on, and things like that.
Mm.
Thank you so much for sharing that strategy. One last thing you feel like you wanted to share with our listeners today that I never asked you yet.
Oh my gosh. Um, that's a very open question. I mean, look, I feel like I've shared a lot. I always have more to share, so I could keep talking for another hour, to be
I'd
honest.
love that. You're so funny.
um,
Mm,
one a question I get asked a lot is like, what is something that I wish I had known or had, if I could go back in time and tell myself something like, and so maybe I'll end on that, which is like
mhm.
the thing that I always reflect on and wish that I had done better or knew, I guess, before is like, it's okay to take up space. And this is coming from someone who like grew up as an introvert. I was never the one to raise my hand in class. I was never the one to offer my opinion in meetings in corporate and things like that, because I always thought that, well, surely if it was a good idea, if it was a good thought, or something, like someone else will say it. And that, I don't know, it was just really, that was just what was the
No,
narrative that was in
I'm
my
not
head.
having a surprise face because it sounds new. No, we've all been through that. I'm
Yeah,
just, yeah, of course.
exactly. And,
Mm.
I think for me, like that's why I always go back to, it's okay to take up space. I wish I wish I had known that and was okay with that, in my younger days. And no matter how old we are, even now, I need to keep telling myself that it's okay to take up space. And so that's probably one thing that I would leave people with, is just take up space.
Take up space. Words of wisdom from Deidre Tshein, the founder and CEO of Capsho, a community of Capshovians, the software that helps you with your podcasting, everything, literally. And she helps coaches and entrepreneurs who have podcasts. Thank you so much for sharing so much value and strategies that help us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
My absolute pleasure. Before you go, how would you like anybody who's listening to find you?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to have it check out Capsho, then definitely go to freegift.capsho.com. That's freegift, one word, capsho.com, because we have a extended free trial on there, plus some amazing bonuses. I go a little bit deeper into some of the strategies that I mentioned around social media and things like that. So there's a bunch of training in there as well that you can access.
We love free gifts. Thank you. Freegift.capsho.com.
Yes.
And Capsho is Capsho.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and one last thing too, for
Please.
anyone who is looking to be the absolute icon in their industry, as in the go-to person in their industry, which means that what I spoke about, like creating content, growing your audience, and actually monetizing it. I'm actually partnering with a couple of really great friends, smartest guys in what they do, uh, on a free event. So can I share that as well? So that's
Please, thank you. Please bring
yeah.
it.
Yeah, for sure. It's just at www.industryiconlive.com. Industry Icon Live, it's a free 5-day event. I'd love for you guys to be there. And, I for one, am going to learn so much.
Mhm.
And I cannot wait to also give and have everyone else learn just as much, if not more.
Thank you so much. Industryiconlive.com. When
Yes.
is the event?
So that's going to be happening on the 19th. So Feb 19th. So in a couple of
February
weeks' time.
19th,
Yeah.
which means let me publish this before that so that everybody can log in before. Okay.
Yeah. That would be awesome.
February 19th. Industryiconlive.com.
Yes.
We love to learn, and because we are all trying to find our way around the online space.
Yes.
So the more that we share, the better for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
My absolute pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify, and stay tuned for more episodes to come.